I don't care if you're just waking up, if you're about to go to sleep, if it's lunchtime. I don't care what time it is, because this moment is just about the most important moment that you're going to have all today, because the reason behind that, the importance there, don't look at me like that, Jack. We are about to enter the first elimination matches of this MDI of this weekend. My name is Rich. I'm going to be your host. I'm joined on the desk by Jack and Sours. And folks, we're about to get into that big moment. We're about to send teams home. By the end of the night, only 6 teams are going to be left remaining in that region of China. We've seen some pretty impressive teams. What do you think of the lot that we actually do have down here in the lower bracket? We, of course, have CBA and FIREFANG. They're going to be coming up first. Sours, we'll start with them.
Sure, so we saw a lot of slop from these guys in previous dungeons. We saw a couple of bolsters on a boss in Ivashar, which you never want to see, of course. And, you know, just there was a lot to be desired in their gameplay earlier, but they've definitely had a long break now to gather their minds and to practice a little bit more. So we hope to see some big improvements from both of these teams, and this should be a really close series.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, though, they are not the only teams that are going to be on the chopping block. So we're going to look ahead into the future just slightly here. Ying, Ying, Ying versus Sherpy. Jack, now, these are 2 squads also. One of them is going to be going home by the end of the night.
That's right, exactly right. And like we're talking about, you're seeing, I think the Ying, Ying, Ying and Sherpy is going to be, a lot higher performing in the game. I think, you saw a lot where going in the first series with FIREFANG there, it was just absolutely getting steamrolled there by Skyline D. So very, very interesting to see in a little bit of a closer scenario there for that later game.
Well, he also brought up a team that's just been a wrecking ball in this region. It can potentially be a wrecking ball throughout the entire world. That, of course, is Skyline D. And now we know they're going to be on a collision course tomorrow with Sun Sky. So we're going to talk about those guys a little bit later. But tonight, the 2 matches that we have left are going to be on that bottom portion of your screen, bottom left, if I know my left from my right, which I assume that I don't. But losers round 1, CBA versus FIREFANG and Ying 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 versus Sherpy. You know the teams, but now we should talk about the key, because it's switching up quite a bit. It's interesting because it is actually similar to what we saw in round 1 as far as keys are going to be concerned. But Sours, here, we're not going to be starting out on Maw of Souls. We're actually going to be starting out in Upper Karazhan.
Yeah, so Upper Karazhan is a dungeon that all these teams had a ton of practice in. This was one of the time trials map, so every single team has done hundreds of pools. Hopefully not hundreds of pools, right? But
millions, hopefully millions.
Hopefully not that many now, but they had infinite tries to get the perfect time they could up in Upper Karazhan during time trials, and these 2 teams finished within 2 seconds of each other during time trial. So now here they are on the stage, and we'll see who can execute a cleaner dungeon and come out on top.
That's actually a really important thing to mention, because when you look at the key as a whole, this is pretty much what we did see in the time trial. So millions on billions on gajillions of zillions of pulls really done for the time trials here, if my math is correct, Jack. And that does mean that the time trials that we actually have seen, those results that did come in, the fact that they were very close, that's important as we're about to jump into this game.
Well, the interesting thing is also going to be looking at how much that they were actually practicing Upper Kara, how much they were anticipating going to Upper Karazhan, because neither of those teams, when they lost any of their matches, actually chose this dungeon. So I think part of it could have been that they were just a little bit afraid of like their opposing teams, for example, how much practice that Skyline D would have on Upper Karazhan when it's exactly the same as the time trials.
All right, we can try to do as much analysis as we want, but let's just get straight into it. Let's see what these 2 squads can do. And remember, how much is on the line here as we head to this castle of madness, Upper Karazhan. Only 1 team is going to survive this. Tournament lives are on the line. And by the end of this tournament, we will know the 2 top teams in China that will be able to go to the global MDI. And we also have quite a bit of prize money on the line. And now we are ready to kick this off.
So something really cool to see both of these teams do here is both teams are using a rogue. And I believe we see them playing Night Elf as well. Actually, no, it looks like Blood Elf from CBA, and I believe I maybe saw a Night Elf from FIREFANG. There's a lot of really cool strats across all the different regions for how to get past this stairwell at the beginning of the dungeon. Killing these ghosts is very slow, and they're all very dangerous. DKs are going to be taking the Shrieking Terror into the robots, and then they're going to release it and kill it alongside them. Although it looks like CBA is even skipping the robots. It's a dungeon that's very linear, and you would think that everyone's going to do it the same way. But look, we're only 40 seconds into the dungeon, and 2 completely different things are happening. Is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and you're seeing it there, FIREFANG again, holding both those constructs just by the stairwell, giving a nice open area for their DPS just to be able to sit back and be able to not have to worry about any of the void zones that are coming up there. But yeah, like you said, CBA skipping everything until they get to this nullifier here. Very important to note with the nullifier that it will be putting out a little debuff on to one player. They get their soul back, and then they have a very huge damage buff. Important to note that also that the healers can be targeted by it, but if you want to be able to avoid it, getting a line of sight, allowing it to be targeting a tank or a DPS would be much, much more beneficial.
And now we see both teams doing a pull here that was really popularized during the time trials, where they're actually going to pull all of the trash into the doorway. It looks like CBA has actually lost one of their DPS, and as you know, and FIREFANG has lost 2 DPS. You know, this is a very dangerous pull, but if you execute this correctly, then it saves an incredible amount of time. Ideally, you want to be line of sighting those explosive orbs using the doorway and letting them go off, but if some of them spawn outside of the doorway, then this is what you see happen. You know, all these deaths are really costly, and both of these teams shrouded past the initial trash. A full team wipe here could be a tremendous setback. They'd have to kill that trash now. Shroud is on cooldown. It's a 6-minute cooldown. We're only 2 minutes into the dungeon. They won't have it for another 4 minutes, you know.
It's very, very huge loss there by FIREFANG, losing, you know, all of their DPS core there. But they were able to get all the trash down. It's very, very scary when you're pulling all of those elementals in together. But they are moving on. They are getting into Curator here. Big things to focus on, as you're seeing on the left side of your screen with Team CBA. They are getting everybody all stacked up together. They are allowing all of the electricity just to be able to pool on top of each other there. It makes it also a lot easier because all of the electrical energies are going to spawn at the exact same location. These will deal a little bit of single target damage to one player, and then they will also jump, dealing splash AoE damage to everybody else.
Yes, I always love to see how different teams approach Curator. You know, normally if you do this in a pug, everyone's going to stand wherever they please, and the room is going to fill up quite fast, and it gets very dangerous. But when you stack like this, you tend to see here, FIREFANG is doing a nice circle, CBA is making a nice line. Everyone's got their own style, whatever you're comfortable with, and you know, it all accomplishes the same goal. And we like to see these teams end near the door so that they can transition into the next half of the dungeon as quickly as possible after Curator falls.
Yeah, and FIREFANG's doing the circular strat, which is also going to offer maybe a little bit more of a safe area for them. That way they're always going to have basically a little nook for the DPS to get into. Thankfully, they are having an absolute straight line on the side of CBA. So, for example, the Evocate goes up where the boss is taking tons and tons of extra damage, and that really allows, you know, they're able to get to the side of the boss. They don't even have to worry about it, and now they can also just start pacing back to the doorway, like you mentioned, Sowers, where they're able to get back in position. They're able to maximize their mobility, maximize their time, really.
And so the evocation phase has just ended for CBA. They get down to 38%. It makes me believe that they maybe haven't used Lust yet. They could be perhaps saving it for Medivh. There's 2 important Lust timings that teams decided between in this dungeon, where you either want to Lust here on Curator and finish it after the evocation, or you want to Lust on Medivh and finish it right after the Flame Wreath goes off. And so both teams are now maybe FIREFANG perhaps used Lust because they pulled the boss after CBA, and now they're catching up and even passing them on damage. So this is very neck and neck. And
just having that, you know, close catch up, but it'll be interesting to see, like you talked about, you know, especially when you're getting into the Lust timings, you know, how many Lusts are they anticipating getting throughout the dungeon? Is it going to be an even trade, for example, if they want to delay it, get the Lust in on Medivh, and then is that going to affect them a little bit later on? But like you said, they're about neck and neck. There is still the 2-death differential that, you know, will be coming up in the future. But as you're seeing, you know, a lot of the damage on this fight, and a lot of the focus on this fight, just getting these electrical energies down as quickly as possible, because they deal so much damage and provide such a very big hindrance for the healer.
You know, a popular thing that we've seen some Chinese teams do up until this point, including in Neltharian's Lair, is once they feel the boss is appropriately low on health, they'll stop doing all mechanics and they'll just go face and go as fast as they can. Looks like they've managed to kill all the sparks up to this point. Both teams are getting a second evocation. These bosses could actually die at the exact same time. You know, like I said, these teams were only 2 seconds apart in time trials across hundreds of pools. You know, this is a very close dungeon. This is anyone's game.
Yeah, but you're also seeing that, like you said, FIREFANG did use Bloodlust there, so it'll be very, very important to watch, as CBA will be able to take advantage of their Bloodlust for when they go into Medivh. Big thing to note, of course, because we are having to deal with, you know, Medivh, the very important things to kind of watch out for here is because of just being in a tyrannical instance there with Medivh, your Flame Wreaths are going to be so much more deadly, whereas if it's going to be something like Fortified is going to be buffing the Guardians phase, the Bird phase, and it's going to be a lot more lethal there. So thankfully it's going to be Tyrannical, it's going to be focused on that Flame Wraith healing, and Paladin is just so well suited for that.
So yeah, what's exciting is you see that both teams actually ended up using a Lust. The CBA used a Beast Mastery Hunter.
Okay.
They got the Ancient Hysteria buff, and so the difference between FIREFANG, who used drums, is there's a 5% haste difference for teams who use Lust or Ancient Hysteria, Nether Winds, Heroism, versus using Drums of War. And so now they're going into Medivh. Neither teams have the Lust available, so we like to see, they're going to see all 3 mechanics. Now here on Tournament Realm, the order of the mechanics is not random. They're always going to get Birds first, which are very dangerous, followed by Flame Wreath, which is also something that can wipe you, and then Frost, which is a nice relaxing period where the teams can really optimize their damage.
Yep, you're seeing the Guardian's image starting up right away as they get the shade to about 58% there. And again, one of the nice things, especially from a healing perspective, that you're able to take out here is, being able to desync the bird casts that are going out, because they will have the Arcane Bolt cast, but then they will also just pulse AoE. But again, when you're on Tyrannical, it is much, much easier to take these out. They actually killed 2 of them right away, so, there's much, much less that they really have to worry about there, and it makes it so much easier. And they actually do have one more of the birds to really deal with, as you're seeing the cast going off just in the corner.
So yeah, this is another style difference that we see in a lot of teams, where certain teams will actually split DPS in this bird phase and send some DPS to the left, some DPS to the right, and then if you kill the 2 birds at the same time, it's generally actually faster than doing the circle strat that CBA has gone with. It looks like FIREFANG may be doing another circle strat as well, and this was something that really defined the difference between the top teams here in Upper Karazhan and the lower teams. Just optimizing everything you could to go as fast as possible. Flame Wreath is coming up in just a second for CBA. We have to make sure that these guys are nice and spread so that they don't set these Flame Wreaths off, because a wipe here, there's very hard to recover from something like that.
Yeah, but you're seeing they're doing an excellent job here on the side of the CBA, making sure that they're able to get as many dodges in as possible here, and making it so much easier to deal with, especially when you get into Flame Wreath, when you're not having any Void Bolt targets, you're not having any Flame Bolt targets to deal with, and it just goes down into just how much can the Paladin be able to keep them healed up, keep them taken care of, and when you don't have to focus on to any other targets, it just makes your life so much easier.
So Flame Wreath is out here on the BM Hunter as well as the Rogue. The BM Hunter is someone you need to give a lot of help to. He's got a Fireball targeting him right now. Luckily, the Flame Wreath has ended. If a Fireball, normally you can let those go off. They're not going to be too lethal, but when you combo that with a Flame Wreath, that's a recipe for disaster. That's not something you want to have happen. The BM Hunter's doing a really good job. Oh, it looks like FIREFANG is wiped. This is, like I said, it's a huge setback on time. They've got to run back to the room. They've luckily got a pylon down, so they've got a couple people back up. But CBA has got the boss down, and they're going to proceed on, head on to Mana Devourer.
And part of the difference is, when you're able to have the Paladin, is you're able to focus a lot more on the single target healing. You're able to take, for example, Beacon of Faith there, having both beacons up makes things much easier. But what it was, when they got out of that bird phase, just wiping to the Flame Wreath there, just so lethal. Like I said, they got the pylon down. They are going to have to restart. But as you're seeing, that we were talking about those Lust timings. Lust timings are going to be very important as they're going to be moving on. Mana Devourer is going to be next up, and they are well suited to be able to have plenty of immunities to be able to soak up these orbs.
Now we see what I like here on CBA is they're throwing in some style, right? They're using the Avalanche Elixir to turn into meteors for this fall here. Avalanche Elixir actually does not make you fall any faster, so it's purely stylistic choice. I always love to see the teams like to swag out. And we see also the first Boomkin, I believe we've seen this entire tournament so far on FIREFANG. Interesting pick. It makes you wonder, Boomkin single target right now isn't that hot, but their AoE is incredible. So where could FIREFANG be possibly thinking about taking CBA following this dungeon? Surely there must be a reason behind that Boomkin pick.
Yeah, maybe you'd be seeing it for just one of the especially large Mana Worm picks, or Mana Worm pulls, right after the Mana Devourer boss, getting everything in together and just kiting it all out as best as they possibly can here. One of the big things that you're going to be seeing as CBA is about to engage with Mana Devourer here, making sure that they're able to get, the boss dragged really far into the corner. You are seeing them in a lot of them picking up little rats as they're going, so that way they have little rat mount. Makes them move a lot quicker. He's able to get into the corner. The big reason we want to be getting into the corner here is for the primary mechanic from the Mana Devourer. Based off the mana that the Devourer has, he spawns orbs, he starts collecting them again and continues to build up energy. Players have to soak those orbs before they reach the boss. They will start taking some ticking damage that gets harder and harder. You can clear it out by standing in the tornadoes, but we're in a tyrannical instance which deals so much damage. So usually you're just relying on immunity. So you'll have the Paladin pre-AMSing, which he's doing right now, standing right underneath the boss, all the orbs, because he's dragged into the corner, are going to be focused in on the boss there. He soaks so much of it, and if he's on the rat mount, he's able to have the greater mobility. That way he's going to soak up so many more.
Absolutely. So these rat mounts can die, and they also allow you, if you're a caster, you can cast on the move while riding a rat, so it really helps your DPS a lot. It's always nice to have. FIREFANG they're backfighting Medivh again. He's at around 40%. Flame Wreath is out. This time it's on the healer as well as the Windwalker Monk. That healer can heal himself. The Windwalker Monk is actually got quite a lot of survivability as well. So hopefully it won't go off, and then they'll be able to kill Medivh, and then they'll be just behind them. Both bosses are around the same percent, but CBA does have this one boss advantage. Mana Devour is going down really nicely. Additionally, CBA has the aspect of the turtle from the Beast Mastery Hunter to help soak orbs to prevent Mana Devour from exploding on them.
Yeah, and for a group that actually has a ton of dodges available, at their disposal, FIREFANG has really been hitting a lot of these flame bolts, and that might be some of the stress that's going on to the healer there. When you're having to deal with flame wreath at the exact same time that somebody else is getting targeted by flame bolt, and they're not able to, for example, immune it off, they're not able to dodge it. We have shadow steps, displacer beasts, so many different tools that are available to them. So whenever somebody's just taking all that extra damage, mobile healer or not, it makes it so much more difficult, and it really detracts from the player's damage.
Yeah, so FIREFANG only has 3 melee kicks with that 15-second cooldown, and then I believe the Boomkin has Solar Beam on a 45-second cooldown, so they can't quite get 100% of the kicks on this boss that you might expect from other teams if you maybe were to bring 4 melee to this boss, or even 5 if you drop the healer, like we saw a lot in time trials. But CBA has now killed Mana Devour, and we're going to see them go ahead and pull all of these worms, and then FIREFANG is doing the nice fall. The teams like to pull the worms into this hallway, that way any explosive orb that spawns while you're gathering the worms is going to be line of sighted, and now it's going to be this Beast Mastery Hunter's job to kill all these explosive orbs as best as he can. People are dying because orbs are going off, but you see that all the damage right now is being done by this Demon Hunter, but the team
getting so close here to a team wipe, right? You're losing both your both your primary DPSers here. You still have more orbs that you have to be dealing with. The Paladin's doing whatever he can to really keep on dealing with these explosives. But you also have to keep in mind, you need to keep on kiting out these mana orbs, because right there, just as all these mana orbs are just sitting tight, all the mana just goes back into them. They just start pulsing all kinds of AoE damage. Just such a hard thing to deal with if you're not focusing and you're not kiting.
Yeah, their team looks really catered to the pool exactly as they did it. The Assassination Rogue, the Blood DK, the Beast Mastery Hunter, it was all to kill the explosive orbs for this one worm pool. Now we're likely to see them shroud us back up. It's been more than 6 minutes. They're going to skip both of these mobs here on the way up to the room. And you've got to be careful when you're shrouding here, because the first mob is positioned in such a spot that you actually need to use Distract in order to slip by him. And so if they mess up here, they've actually pulled him, so they're not worried
they're
about
around
that.
80%, and I believe the chess game is going to give them about 7 or 8. So they still need quite a bit more percent. They're not able to get it just from the bats alone. They do taunt the bats. They do start bringing in the bats. That way they're able to cleave everything down along with it. Just because, like I said, it's Tyrannical Instance. It's not fortified. These guys aren't too bad to deal with. You do really have to watch out for the Slayer, for the mighty swing that's going to be going out. Having a very, very good chance of just being able to knock somebody back. So, watching your feet, watching your positioning here is just so important. But it's not going to be lethal enough that they just need to be skipping by it.
Absolutely. So yeah, FIREFANG is now, going through Mana Devour nicely. Damage is looking pretty good. You see Windwalkers doing an absolute insane amount of damage over there on this small screen, as looks like CBA is getting ready to shroud past this caster here and move on to the chess event.
Yeah, it can be a pain to just deal with the Pyromancer, and they should be able to pull, I believe, 2 bats along with the chess game and to be able to deal with that. So they're going to go right ahead to the chess game. There is a very long period of RP of just setting up for the boss fight or opening up the gates to the last boss. So they have plenty of time to be able to get all these knights down, let the healer go forward, proc the RP, make sure the gates get open while the rest of the DPS and the tank just takes down those 2 bats at the end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So gotta watch out for all these ground effects here, because any hit of these ground effects during the chess event could potentially kill a DPS. And since they did skip that mob, you can't run back, and that's something that you absolutely want to avoid if at all possible. Whenever you kill a mob here on the chess event, it'll make the king vulnerable, so that you can deal damage to him. Otherwise, he has this invulnerability bubble, as you see on him now. And once the king drops to a low enough health percentage, players are going to be able to damage him regardless of whether or not they kill one of the chess pieces.
Yep, so you see the next knight went down, and you're able to actually see that they're focusing in on the king here. Right as Mana Devour just completely obliterates Team FIREFANG here. Again, another wipe coming in for them right there. And really, it's just so many simple mistakes you're seeing here. Just a little bit too much energy. They have the tools available to them to be able to soak up all these orbs. They, you know, they have the extra damage reduction to be able to pump into the tank just to make sure he's able to clear out his stacks. Just so much simple mistakes, and just little things here and there that's just kind of wiping them.
Yeah, so FIREFANG, you know, they had one of the highest death dungeons we've seen so far this tournament, right? In that Maw of Souls earlier, where they were going quite fast but dying a lot along the way. And unfortunately, their wipes here in Upper Karazhan are on bosses, and a wipe on a boss is extremely costly. You know, the Resto Druid is back to res up his team. They're going to go round 2 on Mana Devourer. Meanwhile, CBA is setting up to go into the final boss here. The team has gone back to kill 2 additional bats, while the Druid has gone forward to start the RP to open up the door to kill the final boss.
Yep, and you're seeing just next try coming up for FIREFANG as the rest of CBA is just regrouping and getting ready for the last boss here. And, you know, again, they're following that same positioning that the CBA is doing. You know, FIREFANG is just dragging them into the corner there. You know, they're trying to make sure that they're getting all of the orbs just soaked up underneath the boss, getting as much damage out as possible here. But one of the biggest things is just making sure that you're playing safely and securely. It's so easy to be able to miss a couple orbs here and there. I mean, you're seeing, like, for example, I don't think that they had the rats. They weren't able to get a couple of the extra orbs that inevitably are going to get a little bit out of range there. So it's really just the focus that you're seeing there. And as you're seeing, you know, it's really paying off for CBA when they're playing it cleanly, they're playing it strongly. And this is the dungeon, like I said, both teams have had in the time trials that they needed to do to qualify. So huge advantage here by CBA as they're going into Visitum.
Yeah, so hopefully for CBA, they'll have a nice, clean boss. You know, FIREFANG, of course, is hoping the opposite. But the worst thing that could possibly happen to these guys is if the tank gets blasted off one of the boats by Visidoon. You know, that's the worst thing that you want to have happen. I know it's happened to me before. I know I'm not so hot on my blood DK, but that's something that, you know, players experience, and it's the kind of thing where you have to stay focused the entire time in the dungeon. You know, one slip up and you might have a wipe, and, you know, the run back here for CBA would be absolutely disastrous if they don't manage to get a pylon off. So it's really important for them to focus and, you know, take this dungeon carefully. They have a nice cushion of time ahead of them, you know, a full boss ahead, you know, 66% on the final boss compared to 33% on the second to last boss. As long as they play safe, this game is in their bag, and then we'll be seeing where FIREFANG takes them in the following game.
Yep, and you're seeing, of course, they're going onto the first spaceship here. They are all running into the boss. You're going to be having, as you go to the next boat there, they're making sure that they're getting, you know, their tanks in safely. The Hunter's kind of holding back just a little bit to make sure that he was in a safe zone. They hit Bloodlust, and they just start burning into the boss here. They ideally want to get the Lust off here to make it as safe as possible, because you will have, you're still in an intermission period when you get onto the last ship there, where you're able to continue just pushing the boss as best as you can. This way, you're going to be able to hopefully avoid some of the more orbs and some of the debuffs that are going to be spawning that you have to deal with. In an ideal format, you know, it's going to be, you're going to skip them entirely, but even if they do go out and you're able to go into the portal when the boss hits around 30%, you know, it makes it so much easier, because the debuff will run out. You won't take any damage. The debuff will run out as you're traveling onto the spaceship, and then you don't even have to worry about them. But you're just seeing, they let the debuff expire. They make sure that they're getting out of the party here before it does expire, and before they even have to worry about it. They are transporting to the final ship right as Team FIREFANG has finally killed Mana Devourer, and they have a huge Mana Worm pull to actually deal with now.
Absolutely. So yeah, so it's commonly accepted and agreed upon in community that second boat on Visidoon is very scary. Unfortunately, they didn't quite have the DPS to beat the debuff timing, but they're here on the final boat. They're just going to pull all these mobs into the boss and kill him, while FIREFANG has got quite a lot of dungeon to catch up with.
Yep, and you're seeing FIREFANG there working on this very same pull that had actually torn up CBA a little bit, so they're trying to see if they can be pulling it off just a little bit more cleanly. You know, and you're seeing just very good job so far. You want to make sure that they keep on kiting the FIREFANG here, making sure that they're keeping any of the mana, the little extra loose mana from getting into these mobs, because while they are extremely slow right now, they need to make sure that they keep on moving them down. They almost have all of them down. Just have to watch out for the explosives there as they're taking it down. But CBA, 4% on Visidoon here. All the debuffs are expiring in just a second here. Getting the dodge there. They have all the trash packs in a very convincing win by CBA, sealing out game one.
You know, the one thing that I do want to say, obviously, that is a relatively convincing win coming out there from CBA, but not a flawless run at all. And it is going to be on FIREFANG here to maybe find the cracks in the game plan of CBA. When we start to think about this next map pool, though, I think you already kind of know them. Maw of Souls most likely isn't going to be the pick. FIREFANG needs to try to pick something that they're strong in. But before we start making predictions about what the next key is going to be, Sours, how about we talk about BM Hunter just a little bit here? I've been waiting for the moment to have a buddy on the desk to talk to you about BM Hunter. Is it true that BM Hunters have a talent called Stomp that allows them to do massive amounts of AoE damage?
Absolutely. So yeah, BM Hunters do love to talent into Stomp to do that massive AoE damage, right? There's three popular BM builds. We're not quite sure what build the Chinese Hunters are running, but they do also like to run Big Game Hunter to deal with explosive orbs, and so it's very possible that they were using that in this dungeon. But you'll see Hunters running either Stomp or Dire Frenzy, mostly based on preference. Both of them are actually fairly close to each other in damage, and you know it comes down to comfort, right? You want to play what you're most comfortable as because you tend to perform the best when you're the most comfortable playing the game.
All right, well, my dream just came true. I got to talk about BM Hunters, but we got plenty of night left ahead of us. We still got to figure out who is going to be the first team to go home. CBA going to take the early lead in this series, but FIREFANG is going to have the opportunity to pick the map when we do return. Guys, it is definitely heating up in this tournament. We are about to find out who the best teams in China really are when we return to continue the first Mythic Dungeon Invitational of the year. All right, whippersnappers, let's jump right back into this one. $25,000 on the line this weekend. 2 spots for the global finals on the line with an additional $100,000 on the line, and we are midway through our first elimination match. My name is Rich Campbell. I'm going to be your host, and joining me, we got Jack and we got Sours. These two are going to be casting all of the action. And I was going to say, hey, let's do a little thought experiment. Let's make a prediction. Let's try to figure out what key it's going to be. We ain't got to do that. We already know what key it is going to be. Nels has been locked in here. It is going to be the second max. CBA can close it out here, or FIREFANG can extend this to a third map. And Sour, starting with you, what do you actually think about this selection of Nels?
So Neltharia's Lair is actually the map that FIREFANG picked earlier in the tournament. However, they picked Necrotic last time as a response to the Skyline D team, where the thought process is that the Necrotic should shut down the double rogue strategy, where you'd like to have extra mobs hitting the boss for them to fan off of. And Sanguine here is just kind of a pick that it's an affix that potentially adds a ton of health to pools if you don't execute them smoothly. So it's really important that both teams do a good job kiting mobs out of Sanguine so they don't heal up.
You don't want to be standing in the Sanguini that can get sloppy very quickly. I do also want to note that in this elimination match and in the next one, of course, we are in the losers bracket right now. Both of these teams have actually dropped one series. That's why they're here facing elimination in our double elimination tournament. But this is going to be the last time, these next two matches, when we close out the night tonight, ultimately, that we actually do see keys on that 22 difficulty. From here on out, it is going to be just that extra bit more difficult. But Jack, I want to hear your opinion as well on this selection here coming in.
Well, like we were talking about earlier, they had already made this pick in the past, right? And it really did not work out well for them at all. So, I mean, when they're taking Sanguine instead of the Necrotic there, I mean, hopefully it'll be showing the, the level of confidence that they're going to be bringing, and maybe this is going to be something that they're going to be, much more practice on than the Necrotic, and not having to worry about, the way that they're grouping the mobs together, the way that they kind of scuffed a bunch of the pulls there. So you're really hoping to see, they've already given it one try. I want to see what they can do here.
It is definitely a comfort pick coming in here from FIREFANG, but let's jump straight into it. We got to go down the water slide. It's time for Nell's Lair. Let's see if this change in affix is going to be enough for this squad to salvage their tournament lives, or we will see FIREFANG get chomped out of this tournament on this map.
See CBA on the left side of your screen on the large monitor. Starting off down the water slide with FIREFANG as the smaller monitor here on the right side. Comms staying the same, preparing for that big pull. What else are you looking to see here, Sarah?
So absolutely. So this is actually the affix that was used in the time trials for the 24. So we do have a idea for the time for what these teams are capable of. FIREFANG finished this dungeon in 21:44, and CBA finished this dungeon in 21:09. So in theory, CBA is at the advantage here, but this is FIREFANG's pick, so that maybe they've put in a lot more practice into it. It really comes down to playing smoothly, right? The FIREFANG had 2 disastrous wipes in the last dungeon, both on bosses. As long as you can avoid that and you can play relatively cleanly, you should be able to, clinch out this win.
Yep, you're seeing there, they're just starting the kite there for both sides, making sure that they're able to get the Hulk out of any of the Sanguine that's going to be spawning from any of the little skitter ads, just leaving behind a huge trail of blood here along the path. Getting the Hulk down is so important to get it down early. The interesting thing to note is I don't believe FIREFANG last time had brought their Moonkin with them.
No, so FIREFANG did run the Moonkin in the previous dungeon, and we do see that the Hunter is actually now switched from Beast Mastery to Marksmanship. And so this first pull, we see it going relatively cleanly for both teams. They're doing a really good job cleaning it up. You got to be careful of the Sanguine. It looks like they pulled the alligators a little bit late, perhaps. They're coming down, dying a little bit more slowly. Both teams are kind of kiting back away from the trash. Both teams, actually, it looks like they've left up the Drogbar, maybe. Maybe the healers brought them down for CBA. But this is a very common strategy that we've seen the Skyline D used to a lot of effect, where you bring these mobs down the cliff and then you use them for the rogue as well as the hunter and even the demon hunter to do increased single target damage to the boss and kill him that much faster.
Yeah, but it's nice that you're not able to have to worry about any of the necrotic that we had for the last time that they were doing this. So as I was mentioning, is having the Moonkin there for the last time that they did Nels. I don't believe that they had it there. They're just seeing CBA getting into the boss first, making sure that they're able to have those drudges right up on top of them right off the bat. And you saw Team Skyline D really did an excellent job when we were going through this instance, making sure that those drudges were living for such a long period of time, while also being able to focus fire any of the skitter ads down, making sure that you're getting any of those down, making sure that they're not going to be buffing any of the boss's ground stomps, making it so much easier for them to get everything down here.
Absolutely. You can see the absolutely incredible amount of damage that the Subtlety Rogue is able to put out thanks to the additional cleave provided to him from those mobs. The Demon Hunter, you would see generally using a lot of I-Beam to do more single target damage to the boss. However, doing so would kill these mobs, and then that would then hurt the Rogue's damage. So they're doing a good job controlling. The boss is dying a lot faster for CBA than it is for FIREFANG. You see the Boomkin is doing an incredible amount of damage on this fight, but how much of that damage is to the boss? This Rogue is doing this incredible amount of damage, but it's single target damage that's coming from the AoE cleave, and the Boomkin's doing an incredible amount of damage, but that damage isn't to the boss, it's to the ads and to everything else.
Yeah, but just the nice balance you're seeing there, the huge differential in health coming out from the 25% differential in HP, just the the cleanliness that you're getting out of this. This is the game that CBA wanted to be playing against Skyline D, and now you're really seeing just right off the bat what they want to be able to put out here.
Absolutely, and this is a map that everyone was looking forward to seeing from the Chinese region. They had a lot of struggles in Neltharian's Lair last year, and they've done a huge job improving. All the teams have done incredibly well in this dungeon. We don't have any Blood DK Rockmora solos anymore. Really clean kill from CBA. 0 deaths so far from both teams, looking really good. FIREFANG still has 20% on the boss, and they're doing a great job at it.
I think that's the message that China wants to send us. They're not afraid of Rockmora anymore.
Absolutely.
Also helps that we're not having it on Tyrannical at all.
Definitely.
CBA there getting onto the water slide first, while there's still another 15% left for Rockmora, for FIREFANG to be dealing with here. And that's one of the things is, the CBA, again, this is going to be FIREFANG's pick. This is, their chosen instance. This is what they want to be improving upon. And CBA is already making just huge headway there, getting set up, and like you see, you'll probably be seeing them skipping the first breaker there, hugging the right side, and getting ready for the same huge pulls that we've been seeing constantly tonight.
Absolutely. This is a very popular pool now here in Neltharian's Lair. When you do these pulls one at a time, it's just extremely slow, so it's very common to see the Blood DK use this Sky Step Potion. He's going to gather an absolutely ridiculous amount of mobs, Gorfings them together, and then he's going to run away while his team cleaves them down behind him. FIREFANG is just behind on the boat. They have actually perhaps even more AoE damage on their team comp thanks to that Boomkin. So this could be a spot in the dungeon where even though they killed the boss, about 30 seconds behind, they could make it up on the AoE damage here on this trash pool.
Yeah, but usually what you see a lot of times when you're getting any of these really big trash pulls in, you see the tanks to try to do as much damage as they can during the duration of that initial stun, but CBA's tanks does not care. He knows he's able to rely on the misdirection. He knows he's able to rely on the tricks of the trade there, but he also just wants to make sure that he's not even worrying about the Sanguine. He doesn't even want to have the threat of, say, the Hulk, for example, standing in multiple Sanguines at the same exact time, and the Hulk just gets absolutely obliterated, and they actually have to just worry about the drummer standing in Sanguine at that point. Very clean pull here by CBA, and really showing just the polish that they're putting onto this instance.
Absolutely. So this is a very practiced pull. A lot of teams were resetting many times on this, so it's really nice to see them executing it flawlessly on their first try. That just shows you how much practice and these teams have put into these dungeons in between time trials and here in the group stage.
Yep, and you're seeing as you were seeing, FIREFANG is actually just forced to kind of start mass rooting or spam rooting the Hulk just to make sure they kind of keep everything in line there together. CBA not even having to worry about it, and already posturing to get rid of the last of the trash before Ularog coming up here. They're waiting on their DK tank to catch up.
Absolutely. So CBA is now perhaps going to wait a little bit. Maybe the DK is going to go straight into it. Gorfing's Grasp may still be on cooldown. Other offensive abilities may be on cooldown. By waiting for those abilities to come back up, they'll be able to do this pull much more cleanly and much more safely. And therefore, by waiting, they're actually going to be doing this much faster. But
yeah, but you're seeing FIREFANG on the other hand. I don't believe they actually have their mass grip back, and they were not taking the time to wait for it. So they're just saying, losing out on maybe a little bit of that extra control there. They do have, I believe, Ursula's Vortex down as they're moving all those mobs, getting them all back stacked up together. So they have a little bit of extra control, a little bit of better options there. But past that, they don't have much in the way of slows. They have D&D with tightening grip, and that's just about it. So the problem they're going to be seeing here is just being able to get everything grouped up and together, maybe getting some Typhoons out, just to make sure that they're able to kind of get whatever kind of control they are. But both sides also are a little bit lacking on those slows. So you're seeing, again, the Hulk, which usually is not going to be slowed that much, very far away from the rest of the mobs, and making sure that any of the extra crystal shards that are going to be coming out from him are going to be fading far away from the rest of the group.
Absolutely. A lot of teams really love to bring that Affliction Warlock into this dungeon to slow down all of these mobs. However, neither of these teams have that available to them, so they're going to just run these as fast as they can while the Blood DK, skedaddles out of there and gets chased down by the Hulk.
And one of the interesting things is that it's not quite necessary, and they're showing that it's not quite necessary to be bringing this. This is something that it always kind of comes in to say, oh, we definitely like having, Affliction Warlock, and defying that, but also for the very reason that you have to be locking in your classes. You have to say, is the advantage, substantial enough for me to always run this on every single dungeon that we're going to be prepared up against, or is it going to be better for me to run with that Windwalker Monk, like we were saying? And
here we see the AoE damage from FIREFANG has been able to overcome that deficit in trash, and they've managed to pull Ularog faster than CBA. The question is, now it comes down to how many cup cycles will they get? You know,
you're seeing there as they're getting, they're starting their very first of the totem cycles there, just as, CBA is just kind of struggling to catch up here. And it's very interesting to talk about, and we've seen this a lot of times tonight, where you're seeing trash is making the most of the difference, rather than it's being, how good your single target damage is. When people are getting those clean pulls in, and actually, one of the biggest things that it was the FIREFANG was not willing to wait for their Gorfine's Grasp to get in. They just pulled in without it. And it really showed that they were able to get everything in together. They were able to take advantage of, say, for example, having a Resto Druid with the Ursul's Vortex.
Definitely, yeah. So there is a bit of a healer war in this tournament. It's a war of Resto Druid versus Holy Paladin
versus no healer
versus Windwalker Monk versus Havoc Demon Hunter versus Assassination Rogue, right? This Paladin healer versus Resto Druid healer, we see the utility that the Resto Druid brings, where they didn't have to wait for the Gorfine's Grasp that CBA had to, thanks to that Ursul's Vortex to keep those mobs gripped up to allow the DK to kite those mobs.
Yep, and you're seeing here, the advantage keeps continuing here for FIREFANG. They're working on making that comeback possible, and really working on making the dungeon that they picked the one that they want to be able to seal out. No deaths on either side here, as there is that continuing advantage, that that extra 10%. But it does look like CBA is looking to catch up and looking to actually pump out tons and tons of damage here when he came up from the totem phase.
Absolutely. So CBA is doing an incredible amount of damage to Olorog. They've caught up to, they're only 10% behind on the boss, and they pulled him much later than FIREFANG did. This is the power also of, while that trash was important, these boss kill times are also going to be making up a huge amount of difference. They will get another cup phase, so both of these teams are going to have to make sure to watch these cups. If you guess the wrong cup, it could be another boss wipe, and that would be the last thing we want to see from this.
Really interesting to note, though, is as they're both getting into the cup phase, there's a 6% difference in HP that they're having to deal with. It's so much more of a catch-up on CBA's part that even though, they weren't able to, for example, FIREFANG was able to take advantage of just not waiting for certain CDs, going in anyway, getting to pull the boss in quicker. Really looks like, just the Paladin or just maybe even the tank just be able to pump out so much more damage on a consistent basis here.
Absolutely. And so another cool thing that we see is both teams are running a rogue, and the pool that the Chinese teams love to do after Olorog heading into the next boss is really clever. It's something you don't see out of any of the other regions, how they use Shroud to skip this really scary trash pack that with the worms and the Grubmasters that a lot of teams struggle with, and it's the cause of a lot of wipes.
Yeah, and it's just the lurkers that are just such a pain. They're not especially lethal. They're not especially hard to deal with. But when you're not able to get everything concentrated in together, you really start seeing the extra grief that you really have to be experiencing. But FIREFANG, of course, is actually not going to be stealthing past them. They are going to be having to deal with these lurkers, and it'll be very interesting to see what the extra effort they're going to have to expend here to make sure that they get them down, as opposed to what we saw from Skyline D, where they just ignored them completely, took extra trash instead to account for it.
Absolutely. So this is some variation in routing that we're seeing right here. We're going to see what CBA is going to do in just a second. FIREFANG is gone. It's Sky Step potioned all the way into the room, gripped all the things up. You see that these little small adds dropped a huge Sanguine Puddle. You want to make sure that you don't heal up any of the mobs, because otherwise all the damage you put into them while killing those small adds is wasted. And we'll see what CBA is up to. They're doing the
CBA just having the exact mirror strat coming out there, and huge damage going out on Big Soldier there for Team FIREFANG, trying to get him out. It looks like he might be just about to perk pop right there. Just huge damage that they really have to be watching out for. He does get Purgatory popped. He is getting himself top back off. But again, when you're having to deal with these lurkers, and I believe one of the grubs did go off, so you're having the grabber just instantly snatching all his ads. So it's really nice that they're able to have the Incarn, but it grabs the healer, instantly just kills him. It's so hard to deal with when the Grub Master just spawns these grubs. The cast for the Metamorphosis gets up, and he just starts wiping out their team.
Yeah, so Hunter has fallen on CBA, Healer has fallen on FIREFANG. Hopefully it's not going to be a full wipe from FIREFANG. A wipe on this pool, like we're seeing right now, is potentially a huge time loss.
And there is that other grub, as you're seeing on FIREFANG's screen right there. They have that other grub that they have to deal with. If they're not able to get that extra stun out on it, then they have another grabber that they have to deal with, and they just have to sit there and wait for it to disappear, right? So the Blood Decay does remain alive. There is still Purgatory, that is not available to them anymore, but they still have to deal with it. They do have that extra grabber spawn, so they spawn 2 grabbers here, not dealing with the grubs. They are able just to stand away from it. hopefully not incur its wrath. They're just kind of having to wait for it to time out. And this is one of the things we saw is like Skyline D didn't even have to worry about this. They were able to just focus fire, and they only had to deal with one Grubmaster rather than the two that both of these teams are dealing with right now.
Yeah, so it's important for players to want to make sure that you deal with these grubs. So they're going to wander around for a little bit, and then they're going to transform into these grabbers. And if you hit them with a stun, so like we saw, if you were watching CBA closely, we saw a bursting shot onto one of the grubs to interrupt it. You can also use the monk, could have paralyzed any of the grubs to prevent transformation. Single target stuns work great. AoE stuns work great. You know, anything you can do to prevent those grubs from transforming will save you a ton of time and, of course, make that pool much safer.
Yep, and you're seeing both groups are getting done at around the same time, with FIREFANG incurring an extra 3 deaths on that account. So everyone's getting at their food buffs, everyone's getting themselves reset here as they're going in. And we've seen a lot of times where we're having, you know, just one ranged DPS or sometimes no ranged DPS having to deal with Neuraxis and having to deal with those extra adds, and even working to great advantage for the sub-rogues.
So something really cool that you can see right here, you can see the DK's taking damage, but he's not quite on screen. What is that guy up to? He's actually gone back and pulled some alligators. They've found some friends to go for help this rogue on the boss. If you're a sub-rogue in this dungeon, you're probably thinking, man, I wish my tank would pull for me like this. This is a dream come true for the Subtlety rogue. They're going to be doing an insane amount of damage. It appears that the same has happened for FIREFANG. You know, this is a really popular strategy that China loves, to feed that fan into to these rogues to do maximum single target damage for the boss.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but at least when you're looking at the trash percentages, though, it looks like they're not even going to need another set of Scorpions for the boss fight. So I believe you'd be seeing something for when we get to the last boss, go stealth through and only be pulling one side of Scorpions, and I believe just having like the rogue pull vanish as they pull the boss.
Definitely. So the CBA has a hunter available to feign death one of the Scorpions, and FIREFANG potentially can CC a Scorpion, or maybe they'll sacrifice a player and then use a B-res on him to skip those Scorpions before the final boss. You know, those guys have a ton of health, and they're very dangerous. We saw Skyline D actually killed both of them earlier in the day. Really impressive pull out of them. But we'll see these teams aren't as strong as Skyline D is, so we'll have to see how they approach the final pools of this dungeon.
Yeah, but you're seeing there, they're just leaving up the all the Richardiles for such a long period of time here, getting so much extra damage there for both sub-rogues, really. And the way that they were able to pull them out, make sure the Sanguine does not get near the boss, so clean, does an excellent job. He also trying to get them out of the pass that, for example, any of the Devouts are going to be going to. That way you're able to get the damage onto them. But again, Neuraxis is just so low for here for FIREFANG. They might as well just ignore them and just burn the boss.
Yeah, so you see the damage is looking very similar across both teams. FIREFANG, of course, is just a little bit ahead. You know, the Subtlety Rogue and the Havoc Demon Hunter from CBA doing a lot of damage, and the Marksmanship Hunter, you know, he's not doing as much damage as you might see out of marksmans from other region, but of course this likely because these Chinese hunters, they love that Sentinel piercing shot, and you make a huge single target trade-off to do the incredible AoE damage that build provides.
Yeah, but you're seeing as CBA and FIREFANG are both at 94%, actually 95% for CBA in terms of just mob count here, getting ready to just stealth through all these packs, make sure that they're able, and like I said, we're probably only going to have to pull one, so they will be a little bit confined for the last boss in terms of the extra space that they have available to them, but it'll be so worthwhile when they just have to only kill one set of Scorpions.
Absolutely. So any wipe here now will probably decide the victor, so we want to see a nice clean pool from both of these teams. What they decide to do will be their fate in this dungeon. If a team decides to be brave and pull both Scorpions, they will of course go over kill count, but if they kill it cleanly and smoothly, then they don't have to worry about those at all during the boss fight, which means the room will be a lot safer for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how actually close the timers are here. I mean, there is, you know, like I said, 15-second differential in health that they have to worry about, but both sides only have to be killing one Scorpion, and the other one they can just take down. The big thing to keep in mind with this boss is you're not able to pull the boss without aggroing the rest of the Scorpion and Trapper packs together. So you have the option of just killing one set of Scorpion and Trapper while you have, say, a Hunter, or just, like you said, you sacrifice somebody. But it looks like they are just pulling everything here for FIREFANG. Yeah, because they had even tried to actually have that sacrifice for their Moonkin. They had to, you know, pull him in there, pull the boss, and then just be able to get away with, you know, letting him die. But it looks like they just failed that pull, and it looks like it's a disaster for FIREFANG as they're just getting a full wipe here.
This is exactly what you unfortunately do not want to see out of FIREFANG. Very unlucky to see that reset happen. It's not uncommon that maybe the Moonkin died too fast or they didn't pull something quite right, but both Scorpions were still alive and they tried to pull the boss, and then they just killed everyone. CBA has killed the Scorpion and they're preparing to pull the boss now, and FIREFANG's got
and the battle res that they set up for their Moonkin to res everybody up, he was just in aggro range of the Scorpion, so they just have to run all the way back with their healer. And right as CBA is just engaging with the boss, like we were talking about, any little civil mistake here, any little error is just the absolute end of these teams.
Absolutely. So, and of course you see that only the Rogue and the Resto Druid has released, of course, for FIREFANG, because they skipped all that trash earlier with stealth. So you want to make sure that you stay there and dead and you contemplate, like, I can't believe I've done this. Why have we wiped? For
the losers bracket game, right? And the ideal format, what we've been talking about, what you want to be able to do is, because when you pull the boss, it aggroes both mobs. What you want to be able to do is you want to have, one of your raid members or one of your party members pull the right side Scorpion Trapper Pack, either die to it or, like I said, if you feign death, you have, invis, a bunch of different options available to you, while the rest of your team then pulls the boss. That way when they reset, when the Scorpion resets, they're not aggroed, and all you have to deal with is the boss. You see flawless performance there by CBA in making sure that they are getting the right mobs that they want aggroed, making sure they're getting the boss alone, being able to skip that extra Scorpion. It does reduce the room that they have available to them, but it makes it so much easier to avoid just more lethal trash there.
Absolutely. So this dungeon was so close all the way through the third boss. You see that it was, neck and neck the whole time. Just a few seconds difference between the first boss, and then it got even closer for the second boss, and then finishing only 2 seconds apart on Neuraxis, and then FIREFANG maybe got a little overzealous there on that last pull, and that wipe is costly. CBA is looking really strong right now. Everyone's at full health. Paladin's got all of the mana.
And again, it happens again, right? FIREFANG trying to get their Moonkin to reset those mobs. That way they don't even have to worry about any of the Scorpions. So now they're stuck pulling Dark Rule with the Scorpion pack, with a Trapper pack. It's just so much damage to deal with. And it looks like they're just going to be wiping again, right as CBA is at 30% left on Dark Rule.
Yeah, this is, it's really unfortunate. FIREFANG's had an absolutely incredible showing in this tournament so far. Just a couple of mistakes here and there, and we see just how costly these mistakes are, right? These wipes on bosses, they set your team back minutes, every single time. It really breaks my heart to see this team go out like this, but, they've done a really fantastic job up until this point.
Just having that kind of back and forth game throughout all of it, but it really shows that the big part of Nell Slayer is going to be the very last part. When you have these perfect setups, when you have these ideal scenarios, when you're going for the perfect trash count, it all is going to be focusing so hard on the execution there, pulling off something a little bit more difficult. But you're seeing CBA with the 2-0 sweep, knocking out FIREFANG and officially sending them home.
Exactly, yeah, FIREFANG will be the first team to get sent home in this China weekend of the MDI. And, not to sound like a bitter old man here, but back in my day, FIREFANG